So first of all, I would like to welcome you all to our workshop. And today we'll be working with the gouache paints. And let me just share you the reference. This will be the reference that we'll be working on today. So do you guys have the reference with you all? I mean, you can just give your affirmation in the chats. So I know, else I'll just keep it over here so that you can see. So I guess we can start with the workshop. Why is it so important that we understand and we pick the correct GSM? Is because when we are working with water soluble paints, it is quite important to pick the right GSM. So for example, I worked on a similar reference before, and this is a 120 GSM paper. And just look at the paper. You can see the color is still visible on the back side, and this was the similar painting that I did before, and I was not able to blend properly, and the color, it seems quite messy over here. As you can see, the paper is all wrinkly and it's quite see-through. So that is why we are going to work with a 245 GSM sheet today, which is from Zen Sangam. And I'll just let you know like what GSM is perfect for gouache. So this is a 150 GSM sheet, and this is quite suitable for when you're working with pencil or sketches or doodling. For example, like this, because the thickness of the sheet is not too thick, but it's better. And this is your 300 GSM sheet. You can see how thick it is. So that's why it's quite important to understand the thickness of the sheet when we are working with water soluble paint. So today we'll be using a sheet, gouache paints. Now, why we are using two water containers? One will be for all the different shades that we'll be using, and one we've kept it separate for just the white shade. Now, it's optional. You can use a single container as well, but when we are working with white color, we don't want any other color to mix with white. And just to save your time and you don't have to run to the water tap again, we will be using two separate containers. To wipe off your brushes, or I'll be using a simple napkin. That's your choice. For the brushes, we'll be using a flat brush. Any flat brush will work. Just make sure one is slightly bigger than another, and one will be your round brush. And a pencil. You can use a masking tape to mark the boundaries of your paper, but I'll be painting on the entire sheet, so I won't be using this tape. So this is optional as well. So let's just start with our painting. First, we will like to draw the rough sketch. Now we'll begin with the grass first, the line over here. So let's just sketch this part first. Now we don't want to put too much pressure over here because this is just a rough sketch and we're going to paint over it anyway. So we'll be marking the lines for it. So the next step will be to sketch the clouds. Now this can be a bit tricky part, but let's just go step by step. So first of all, we'll be sketching the outline of this cloud, like the outer part. Yeah, so as I was saying, you don't need to stress too much about the detailings of the cloud. We'll just have to sketch the outlining part of the cloud. You don't have to get the shape of the cloud as perfect as shown in the reference. Just make sure it looks quite similar to it, not exactly the same. Now the next step would be, now that we have drawn the outlining of this cloud, the next step would be to figure out these lines, like the part that is separating the darker shade to the lighter shade. So let's just mark these lines somewhere over here. Then there's a shape of a cloud over here. Now you can paint it directly using the paints as well, or if just for your reference, you can sketch it using a pencil. Now as you can see, there's a separation over here from darker to light, so let's just sketch this part as well. Drawing a dotted lines, not exactly, I'm not putting too much pressure on the pencil. Alright, so we can just leave it over there. The next step would be to draw these sunflowers. So so you can paint this directly using paints, or you can sketch these first. Why we are doing it? Because see, gouache paints are water soluble, and when you apply layer over layer, there's a slight possibility that you might reactivate the bottom layer, and we don't want the yellow and blue to mix together, because then you'll be painting a leaf. Like instead of sunflower petals, it'll just be a green leaf. So just to avoid that case, we will make a rough sketch for the sunflower as well. Okay, now the next step would be to draw the stem. And random leaves. There's a sunflower over here as well. Now you can see my shapes are not that perfect because this is just rough sketch and we're going to paint over it. Alright, we're almost done with the rough sketch, the pencil sketch, and we don't have to sketch these grasses because we'll be painting this directly using the paints only. So now is the time when we start painting. So when we are working with such landscapes and with where the details are not so much, just make sure you don't sketch everything with the pencil. I mean, that's how I like to work. I just directly like to add these details using the paints itself because the pencil can get smudgy, and that's why I avoid adding details over here. So don't stress too much about the rough sketch. We can add everything using the paints. Now, if you're working on a sketchbook like this and you want to avoid painting on the sheets beneath it, so you can keep a rough paper like this when you're painting over the boundaries. So that's what I'll be doing right now instead of using the masking tape. But yes, you can use masking tape. For the sky, we'll be using a sky blue, or you can say light blue, with a bit of white, because we can see this is not too dark. This is the shade of blue that I have with me, and as you can see, it's a bit darker than what's in the reference. So we'll be adding a bit white to it, and just make sure you take paint in a much larger quantity. Why? Because we'll be painting this entire background, like this part over here, and we don't want to mix the colors again and again. So just take out a bit more paint. And just maintain the consistency of the paint, like it should be flowy. Don't add too much water to it, and it should not be transparent. As you can see, the paint, it should not be too transparent. Right, we can add white to it. So I'm not directly mixing white color with it. I'm just taking it on a separate part of the palette so that I can use it again and again, and I don't ruin this white shade. I think the blue is a bit too much, so it's still too dark, so we'll be adding a bit more white to it. We don't want the background color to be too light, otherwise it'll look similar to the cloud and it won't add the depth. So that's why just make sure the color of the shade of the cloud is a bit lighter than the background. So I guess this looks pretty fine to me. You can adjust the shade accordingly. It might look a bit darker in the video. Okay, so now the trick is either you can use a round brush and mark the outlining of this cloud first, and then begin painting with the entire background, or you can just simply use the same flat brush that we're using. If you're comfortable, then you can use this flat brush, otherwise you can use a round brush. Okay, so first of all, we'll be marking the outlining of this cloud. Now you can adjust the consistency with adding water to it. So I'm just lightly dabbing the brush over here. I'm not painting it like this. Why? Because we want to keep this texture of the cloud over here as well. Done with this side. Let's follow the same process over here as well. Okay, and we don't want to paint over the flowers, so make sure. So I'm leaving this part because I'll be painting this with a smaller brush. We'll be leaving some space here for the petals. Now that we have painted over the outlines, we'll just simply paint over the entire background. I'm using this sheet so that I don't apply paints on the sheets below it. This is how smooth your consistency of the paint should be. We'll be following the same process over this side as well. So we're just trying to merge these outlines with the paint. So I'm done with the sky. Now I'll just share a small technique with you all. Like, how can you make sure the consistency of your paint is correct or not? So see, if you apply too much water to your paints, this is how it's going to look like. Like, you can see the water, it becomes, the paper, it becomes transparent. See the difference between this and here. When once it dries up, it'll look transparent, and we don't want that to happen. And if you apply too much paint, let's just apply paint without any water. This is what happens. It becomes a bit rough and it's not easier to smudge. So that's why we want to make sure the consistency of our paints is flowy, but it's not too liquidy, so that we can start painting the clouds. So what we'll be doing is, as you can say, there are multiple shades in this cloud. This is the lighter part and this is a darker part, but this color is different from the background, right? So we'll be preparing some different shades and we'll go from darker to light. So first of all, we'll be painting all these darker areas here, and then followed by lighter shades, and then we'll be merging them together. Okay, so we'll just start with preparing the shades first. So now this shade is lighter than this, right? So we'll be adding white to the same blue. Now it's still dark. Let's just take out some of the paint from here. We don't want the color to be too dark. The second shade would be a bit lighter than this one. So let's just add to this white only. Now here you can see some bluish gray color, right? So we'll be preparing this shade as well. Take white. Small amount of blue. And just so you don't make this color to be too dark, add a pinch of black to it. Oh, this is too much. So we just want to get this grayer shade. I've added too much black to it. Alright, so now that we have 3 different shades, we'll be adding the lines. So first, starting with the darkest shade that we have prepared. Okay, we'll be taking a slightly smaller brush than we've been using before. So let's start with this part first. We just have to paint these shades, this area over here. We'll be using the same technique that we used at first, just dabbing the brush. To get the shape of your clouds. And we'll be mixing it with white, so don't worry, just apply the shades first. We'll be adding layers to it. You just have to paint over the darker parts of this cloud, wherever you feel that there's a darker shade. Next, take the lighter shade. In the same technique, we'll be painting this area, this part. So I'm leaving some white spaces in between just so to add this cloud lines over here. You can leave some random white lines over here. Anywhere you feel that there should be a line or a cloud separating. Then we'll be adding some lighter shade over here as well. Again, leave some white space. Carefully paint the lighter blue shade over here as well. Make sure you don't paint over your flower. Then I can see some lighter shades over here as well. So let's add these. Slightly dab your brush. Somewhere over here. But this color over here is different from white. So we want to make sure that these two colors are different, right? So what we'll be doing is, so we have already prepared this shade, but just to remind you again, we'll be adding white, a pinch of blue and a pinch of black, just to get that bluish grayer shade. So I'll be using a smaller round brush to add this detail. if you think that all these layers are looking different and they're not merging together, don't worry, we'll be merging them all. Just add the layers first. You can continue with this step. I'll just tell you different techniques to merge the shades together. So let's take a darker shade first. I have this darker shade, and then a lighter shade. I'll tell you three techniques. So I'm just painting it over here. Okay, so how do you blend these two shades together? So the first step is you take both these shades that you're using, the darker one, and mix it with the lighter shade. So basically create a shade that lies in the middle of these two shades. That's how you can blend the two shades perfectly. Basically, you're using the shades again. You're using these two shades to blend them perfectly. You can see the gradient from darker to lighter shade, right? The second technique is you take a bit of white color. Merge these two shades together. It looks slightly different and lighter from this. This will give you the perfect gradient when you create a shade that lies in between the darker and the light shade. This will give you a bit lighter tone because we're using white over here to blend these two shades. Another technique is you just dip your brush in the water, tap it to make sure your brush is still wet, but it's not too drippy. And using the water, you can blend these two shades. I'm not using any color, I'm just using water to blend these two shades. Now this technique is not possible when you're working with acrylics because you cannot reactivate the color. But if you're working with gouache, you can do this. We'll be using the same technique to blend these shades in the class. So we prepared a darker shade, lighter shade, and now we'll be using white over these parts to blend all these shades together. So first of all, let me take out white colors. Now for these bigger portions of the cloud, we'll be using this flat brush. And to add the details, we'll be using a round brush. So just slightly add your white to all the negative spots. So all we are doing is just painting these left out spaces in the cloud with the white color. Now we'll be using a smaller brush. So be careful when you're working on this part because you don't want to activate the bottom there. We will use the damp brush to blend these two shades together. Now, if you feel like you need to add more color to it, and the paper is becoming too transparent, then feel free to add. I am just right now blending these two shades using water. Now, if you feel the white, you've added the white too much, you can add the darker shade again and then simply repeat this blending process. Now, I know this step will take some time because we are just blending all the shades together, but just be patient. I'm going to add a final layer of white color, but we'll be doing that at the end of the painting so that all these layers dry up. Okay, if you feel that it's that you're not able to see the darker shades, then I would suggest to apply the darker shades again so that you achieve that perfect blend. So you can use more color instead of white. We'll start with the grass. First step would be to take a darker shade of green. Let me show you the green color. This is the green shade that we'll be using. It's a slightly darker shade of green. Now take this darker shade and apply it all over here. Okay, so now we've done with the darker shade of green. Add a bit of, either you can take a lighter or add white to the same green that you've applied on the background. So this is the green, lighter green. Using this lighter green, we'll paint this grass over here, only on the top of the layer. We need to make sure the bottom layer is dry before applying the next layer, but since we are out of time, I'm just applying it over it. Right now, I'm just using a lighter shade of green to add the grass at random places. Alright, so we'll use the same shade of green, the lighter shade, to paint these stems. Now add a bit of white to make it even more lighter. Now we'll be painting the leaves. Okay, so right now I'm just painting all the leaves over here using a darker shade of green again. So my darker shade of green looked pretty lighter to me. That's why I've added a bit of black, or you can even add brown to make it dark. Don't worry if it looks too dark to you because we'll be adding layers. Add a layer over here. And you can use the same darker shade to add some details over here as well. So the simple technique is to add layers starting from darker to light. Now for this even lighter shade of green, all you have to do is take a light green, add white and a bit of lemon yellow to it. This seems a bit light darker, so I'm going to add white to it. Add some details over here. I still feel it's dark. Alright, so now we'll be painting our sunflower. You've almost come to the end. You can keep on repeating this process. Till then, I'm going to just clean my palette. Alright, so we'll be taking a yellow at this medium yellow shade, and I'll be using this to paint the sunflower. So we're almost at the end. For painting yellow, we'll take dark brown, or you can say burnt umber, whichever shade you have. This one. And we'll be painting this inner part of the sunflower. Like this. Okay. Then we'll take yellow, add a bit of brown to it, and we'll paint over this part. And you can add some dots in the middle section as well. We'll repeat the same process for the other sunflowers as well. I'm just trying to paint these small dots over here. I know it might not be visible here, but let's just use yellow to add details. So all I'm doing is use yellow color to add some details over here. Now it would have been better if the bottom layer was dry, but again, because of the time crunch, I'm just painting over these layers. Okay, now we are good to paint our petals. Now, take the color and your round brush and just simply swoop it like this. Make sure the pointed part is in the outer edge. Just repeat the same process. We're going to add the details using a lighter shade of yellow afterwards. Just paint the petals first. I'm just adding a darker brown over here because it seems to have merged with the yellow. Now let's take lemon yellow. I'm using slightly smaller brush. Now again for this part, your background color needs to be dry completely. Right, so we're almost done. And you can add details to your sunflowers using the same technique that we've been using in the clouds. So go from darker to lighter shade. Now I won't be taking much of your time. So yeah, it's time to wrap up the session. Well, thank you all for joining today's workshop, and I hope you learned some techniques over here. And also, before leaving, I would like to announce that Zen Sangam has launched a new sketchbook called Pastel Dream Sketchbook. It's available in 2 shades, and the quality is the same. It's 245 GSM. And you can also participate in a contest. You can check out the pinned post on Zen Sangam's page with the hashtag storytell with ZS. And if you have any doubts, feel free to reach me out on Instagram or the WhatsApp community. We'll be sharing a link with you all to join. So that'll be all for today. And thank you.